The coffee did not spill. That was the first thing Vorek noticed. The transport beam had pulled this woman across 11 star systems in less than a second, a crossing that made grown warriors scream and scholars wet themselves on arrival, and her coffee had not spilled, not one drop. She looked down at the cup in her hand, checked it, and then looked up at him. "Oh," she said, "hello." Vorek's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. He could not help it. The blink was what his species did when the mind hit something it could not file. He had processed 800,000 candidates in this holding chamber. He had never filed a greeting before. Her name was Lily Parker. She was 29 years old. She taught children to play a small wind instrument made of plastic. According to every scanner Vorek had running, she was in perfect health, carrying no weapons, no implants, no augmentation of any kind, and her heart was beating at 68 times per minute. The heart rate of a person reading a book. The heart rate of a person waiting for a bus. He checked the reading 3 times. Her file said, music teacher, no combat record, no special designations, no prior contact with off-world entities. He had pulled it the moment she materialized because something about her arrival had felt wrong in a way he could not yet name. She had come through the beam mid-sip. The cup was white and small, and the steam was still rising from it. She had set it down on the chamber floor with the same care she might use setting it on a kitchen counter, tilting it slightly to find a flat section of the smooth gray surface. And then she had looked around the holding chamber the way a person looks around a slightly unusual shop. That was the wrong detail, not the coffee itself. The tilt, the tiny adjustment she made to keep it from wobbling. She had done it before she even finished looking up at him, before she had taken in the walls or the ceiling or the fact that she was no longer on Earth. The instinct was faster than the fear response. It was faster, Vorek would think later, because in this woman the fear response did not come first at all. He pressed the button that opened the speaking channel. "Lily Parker of Earth," he said. His voice came through the chamber in her language, translated by the systems overhead. "You have been selected as the representative of your species. Your planet is under assessment. You will face 5 rounds of testing. If you pass all 5, your species will be permitted to join the wider community of worlds. If you fail a single round, your species will be set aside for 1,000 of your years. Do you understand?" She took a sip of her coffee. "I think I'm still dreaming," she said softly. "This is a very strange dream." "This is not a dream, Lily Parker." Well, a short pause. A small laugh, warm and personal, the kind of laugh aimed at no one in particular. "Then I'm having what my therapist calls a very bad day." She looked at him through the transparent wall of the holding chamber. Her eyes were calm, not forced calm, not the rigid calm of a person holding themselves together by the back of the neck. Just calm, the way water is calm, the way early morning is calm. Vorek's 4 eyes blinked again, 2 and then 2. "The rounds will begin shortly," he said. "You will be moved to the first testing chamber." "Can I ask a question?" He had expected, what happens if I refuse? What happens to my family? How do I know you're real? He had a scripted answer for all of those. He had given those answers 800,000 times. "You may," he said. "Do you mind if I hum while I think? It helps me focus. I do it when I'm grading papers, or planning lessons, or doing anything that takes concentration. I just want to make sure it's not against the rules." Vorek searched his database. He searched it for a full 4 seconds, which was a long time. There were rules about weapons. There were rules about outside communication. There were rules about attempts to damage the chamber walls. There was no rule about humming. No candidate in the history of the Assessment Bureau had ever asked about humming. No one had thought to legislate it. "Humming is permitted," he said. "Thank you." She picked up her coffee cup again, cradled it with both hands, and began to hum. It was quiet and simple, a gentle up and down pattern that his audio systems flagged as harmless ambient sound and did not bother to analyze. He should have analyzed it. He would spend a long time thinking about that later. He should have recorded every note and sent it to the pattern lab. Instead, he logged it as candidate behavior, unusual but non-threatening, and he prepared the first trial. "Stay close," What I'm about to tell you does not make sense by any measurement we had. It didn't make sense to me when it happened, and I was there. The observation deck above the holding chamber had a long window of dark glass that looked down at the candidate. Vorek stood at it now, with Trial Master Keth beside him. Keth's species had 7 small eyes arranged in a wide crescent across her forehead and 3 mouths, the true pronunciation of her name requiring all of them. For practical purposes, she was Keth. She had worked beside Vorek for 200 cycles. She was watching Lily Parker sit cross-legged on the chamber floor, drinking her coffee and humming, and her 7 eyes were all doing slightly different things, which meant she was unsettled. "She is too calm," Keth said. "Yes. Is she sedated?" "No, the scanner shows caffeine, a small amount of sugar, and nothing else." Keth made a sound that was not quite a word. Her heart rate. 68. At rest. Yes. Vorek, Keth turned to him, all 7 eyes now converging. That is the heart rate of someone sitting in a warm room, not someone who has just been told her species' future depends on the next few hours. "I know. Our scanners have never failed to detect a suppressed fear response. We built them for that. The fear signal comes through even when the candidate is controlling their breathing, controlling their expression, controlling everything they have the ability to control. It still comes through." "I know. There is no fear signal." "I know." Keth was quiet for a moment. On the screen below, Lily had finished her coffee and was looking around the chamber with mild interest, the way a person looks at a painting in a waiting room. She had set the cup down beside her, slightly to one side, out of the way. "Maybe humans are different," Keth said. "Maybe this one is different," Vorek replied. Neither of them said the obvious thing, which was that in 800,000 candidates, they had never once had to distinguish between those 2 possibilities. Either a species was different from others in some recorded and catalogued way, or an individual was different from their species. Those were 2 separate questions with 2 separate files and 2 separate protocols. They had never had a candidate where both answers might be true at the same time. "The Bureau has had 45 failures in this assessment cycle," Vorek said. He said it the way he said everything to do with statistics, flatly, as a report, because that was the only way he knew to carry numbers. 31 species, the highest single-cycle count in 200 years. And now, we have a music teacher from a garden world who arrived mid-sip and asked about humming. "She is going to be number 46, Keth said. "Yes," Vorek watched the screen. Lily Parker had stretched her arms above her head, the way humans did when their backs stiffened, and then she had looked directly at the camera. He was certain she had no way of knowing was there. She had waved, a small, friendly wave. Vorek's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Or," Keth said slowly, "she is not." Below them, the first transport beam charged. Lily picked up her coffee cup, found it empty, set it back down beside her with the same careful tilt as before, patted it once with 2 fingers like a small goodbye, and stood up. "I'm ready whenever you are," she said pleasantly to the room. "I have a class at 9 in the morning my time, so if we could try to be efficient, that would be great." Keth made a sound Vorek had never heard her make before. He would think about it later and conclude it was someone trying very hard not to laugh. The beam took Lily. She was humming when the light took her. The logic labyrinth had been built 3,000 cycles ago by the best minds from 12 worlds. Its walls were made of shifting light that responded to thought. Its corridors rearranged themselves based on the mental patterns of whoever walked them. The simplest explanation of what it did was this: it tested whether a mind could hold itself together when the ground kept moving. The average completion time was 9 days. The record belonged to a species of crystal-based thinkers who processed information faster than Vorek's own brain could follow. They had done it in 3 days and 7 hours. That record had stood for 400 cycles. Vorek pulled up the monitoring feed as Lily entered the labyrinth. He noted the time, 8:47 in the morning by her planet's clock. She was still humming. He noted that too, the way he noted everything, in the flat language of the intake log. Candidate humming on entry, no fear indicators. heart rate 69. The labyrinth's walls shone soft purple around her. Mathematical constructs floated in the air, equations that rearranged themselves as she approached, designed to confuse, to make the mind grasp for meaning that wasn't there. She walked past them. "These look like the posters my niece has in her bedroom," she said to no one. "She loves math. I should see if I can take a picture for her." On the observation deck, one of Vorek's junior analysts slowly put down his data slate. The labyrinth's first real test was the branching corridor, two identical paths, both mathematically indicating the same destination, no logical basis for choosing one over the other. The test was the choosing. Most candidates stopped here for hours. Some stopped for days, running probability calculations, building decision trees, trying to find the logic that would make the choice safe. The labyrinth was designed to escalate their hesitation until it became paralysis. Lily looked at the two corridors. She looked down at her left foot. "My left shoe is a little loose," she said. "I'll go left. If I'm wrong, I can just come back." She went left. The junior analyst's data slate hit the floor. Vorek stared at the feed. The labyrinth was supposed to read her mind and build obstacles from what it found there, her fears, her doubts, the things she hid from herself. Those were the raw materials. That was how it worked. But her mind was giving it nothing to build from, no fear, no doubt, no hidden weight pressing against the floor of her thoughts. The corridors, which should have been narrowing and darkening around her, began instead to widen. Keth said very quietly, "Vorek, the labyrinth stress readings are going down." "I see it. That is not supposed to happen." "I know." Ahead of Lily, the labyrinth was doing something Vorek had never seen it do in 3,000 cycles of documented operation. It was creating a bench. A small flat surface at exactly the right height for a human, extruding itself from the wall of shifting light because her feet had slowed and her steps had gone slightly uneven. She sat on it. "Thank you," she said. "That's very kind." The bench glowed a shade warmer. Vorek found that he did not have a category for what he was seeing in the instrumentation. He had many categories. He had worked at the bureau for a very long time, and he had categories for everything. He looked at the readings for a long moment, the way a person looks at something they are not sure they are reading correctly, and then he wrote in the log the only word that fit. "Happy," he wrote, and then he looked at what he had written and left it there because it was accurate, and the log was for accuracy. Lily Parker stood up from the bench, straightened her shirt, and walked deeper into the labyrinth. She was still humming. The tune had changed, something slower now, something that moved like water over a smooth surface. The walls moved with her. The mirror room was the part that usually broke them. Vorek had watched 800,000 candidates reach the labyrinth's mirror room, and he had a very good sense of what happened there. The mirrors showed possible futures, not false ones, not invented terrors, but actual branching paths drawn from the candidate's own mind, the ones they feared most. An old candidate showed an older one. A sick one showed a sicker one. A lonely one showed a lonelier one. The labyrinth pulled these images from whatever the candidate was carrying and put them on glass, floor to ceiling, every reflection a version of the same person going wrong in a different direction. Warriors had fallen to their knees in that room. He had on file a scholar from a species that had written 10,000 volumes on the philosophy of time, and that scholar had sat down on the floor of the mirror room and refused to move for 19 hours. Lily Parker walked in and stopped in front of the mirror that showed her older. The reflection had gray in her hair and circles under her eyes and the look of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. Most candidates looked at these reflections and felt the weight of every wrong turn that might have led there. The machine was designed to make that weight physical, pressing down through the mind until the mind buckled. Lily tilted her head. "Oh," she said softly. She stepped forward and touched the glass. "Hey, you look like you've had a long life. I hope it was worth it." A pause. "I hope you have some good stories." The reflection did something it was not designed to do. Its shoulders, which had been slumped, came up slightly. Its expression shifted in a way that Vorek's monitoring system logged as ambiguous, not in the expected distress range. He stared at the readout and then looked back at the screen. Lily had started humming again. Something different from before, brighter at its center, but with a soft pull under it, like a song about something that was already gone but not badly missed. The mirrors rippled. Then they were gone. The whole room dissolved, the reflections and the glass and the low light that the labyrinth used specifically to make candidates feel small, all of it pulling back at once, and the corridors that opened ahead of her were warm and wide, and the equations floating in the air had arranged themselves into something that looked, from the observation feed, almost decorative. Vorek pulled up the labyrinth's stress readings. The numbers were still going down. Beside him, Keth's 7 eyes had all narrowed to the same point on the screen. "It is not challenging her anymore," she said. "No, it is just letting her through." "Yes." Vorek, Keth turned. "The labyrinth has never done that." "I know." On the screen, Lily had reached the center room. The pedestal rose from the floor the way it always did, carrying the question the labyrinth had drawn from the deepest part of her mind. Vorek could read it on his monitor. He always could. The question was how the Bureau checked its fairness. It needed to know what the labyrinth had used. The question on the pedestal read, "Why do you think you are not enough?" Vorek read it twice. He had seen hard questions in that room. He had seen questions that named specific failures, specific people, specific days. This one was different. This one went under all of those. He sat a little straighter. Lily read the question. She read it twice too. Then she laughed, not a sharp laugh, not a scared one, but the soft laugh of someone who had been handed something they found genuinely surprising. "Oh," she said, "oh, I don't think I've ever really thought that. I think I've just been tired or confused or not sure what comes next. But not enough. I don't know, I don't think I ever really believed that." She was quiet for a moment thinking, "I teach little kids, 6 and 7 years old. And when they mess up a song, they always ask me the same thing. They ask, did I do it wrong?" Another pause. "And I always tell them the same thing. I tell them there is no wrong in music. There is just where you are and where you want to go. And the path between those two places is just practice." She reached out and touched the pedestal. "I think maybe I've always believed that about myself too," she said. "I'm not wrong, I'm just somewhere, and I'm trying to get somewhere else. A breath. One day at a time, that's all anyone can do." The pedestal's question faded. The far wall opened. Bright light came through. Lily tied the lace on her left shoe, which had come loose again, and walked out the other side. The time on Vorek's screen read 47 minutes and 3 seconds. He looked at the number. He looked at the crystal mind record that had stood for 400 cycles. He looked back at the number. Keth said nothing. One of the junior analysts, the one who had dropped his data slate at the loose shoe corridor, was now crying quietly into his collar, not loudly, the way people cry when they do not want to be noticed. Vorek wrote in the log, "New labyrinth record, 47 min 3 sec. Previous record, 3 days, 7 hours. Method, shoe-based corridor navigation, bench conversation, pedestal answer approximately 90 words. Reason, unclear." He read what he had written, then he added one more line. "Diagnostic on fear response scanner still pending." Arbiter Kesh had been designing combat simulations for 300 cycles, and he was proud of his work in the specific, careful way of a person who had built something honest. The simulations were fair. They were calibrated per candidate. He did not throw impossible things at small species, and he did not give soft tests to powerful ones. He tuned everything to the exact measure of what stood in front of him. He had laughed when Vorek sent him the labyrinth readout. Not unkindly, he had laughed the way a person laughs when a number surprises them. 47 minutes was an extraordinary number. He respected extraordinary numbers. "Good for her," he had said to his assistant. "Now let us see how she does against a Virilic." The Virilic was a creature from a dead world. Kesh's team had its genetic record pulled from the archive of a species that had gone extinct before any of the current member civilizations had reached orbit. The Virilic had been, in its time, a perfect predator. 8 limbs, claws designed to grip and hold, eyes arranged around the head to see in all directions at once, a jaw built for crushing. It hunted by sound and by heat, and at close range, by a secondary sense that had no name in any living language, because no living species had needed to name what it felt like to be tracked by one. For the combat trial, Kesh grew a simulated Virilak, not truly alive in the deepest sense, but everything the original had been in terms of instinct. He set the aggression level to standard for a human-sized candidate, not maximum. He was not cruel, just enough to make the test real. The chamber was round, smooth grey walls, soft light from above, no weapons for the candidate, no cover, a wide open space with 2 doors, one where the candidate entered, one where the Virilak came through. Lily walked in still humming. She had slowed the tune down somewhere between the labyrinth exit and here. It was softer now, the kind of song that moved at the pace of breathing. She looked around the chamber, took in the smooth walls and the empty floor, and did not look for a place to hide or a thing to use. She just stood in the middle of the room, her hands loose at her sides. Kesh's assistant checked her heart rate from the monitoring feed. 72, she said. Check it again. 72, Arbiter. Kesh looked at the reading without speaking. 72 was the heart rate of a human watching something pleasant on a screen. It was not the heart rate of a human who had just been told a predator was about to come through the door. The door opened, the Virilak stepped in. It was large, grey-dark skin that shifted as it moved, the color of deep water with light coming through. 8 limbs placing themselves with complete quiet on the chamber floor. 6 yellow eyes spaced around its head, each one tracking independently. Its breathing was slow and deep. It was calibrated to hunt, and Kesh had built it well, and it entered the room, and it locked onto the human figure in the center, and it stopped. Kesh leaned forward. The Virilak stood in the doorway with all 6 eyes on Lily Parker, and it did not move. Its hunting posture had not engaged. The low crouch, the weight shift to the back legs, the jaw part, none of it. It was just standing there, its head tilted very slightly to one side. Arbiter, his assistant, said, "Why is it not moving?" "I don't know." Lily had not moved either. She did not back away. She did not raise her hands or change her stance. She simply lowered herself slowly, bending her knees until she was sitting cross-legged on the chamber floor, and she held out one hand with the palm up, and the fingers relaxed, and she kept humming. The Virilak tilted its head the other way. It took one step forward, then another. The movement was wrong, not the controlled approach of a predator closing distance, but the careful, curious step of something that had heard a sound it had never encountered before and was trying to get closer to understand it. It crossed the chamber floor in 8 more steps and lowered its enormous head to the ground 1 pace from Lily's outstretched hand. A sound came from deep in its chest, low and continuous, the kind of sound that Kesh had in the archive recordings of the original species but had never heard in a simulation. The original Virilaks had made that sound only around their young. Lily placed her hand on the top of its head and moved it in slow circles. "Hello, buddy," she said. You're all right. 6 of the creature's eyes closed. Kesh's assistant put her hand flat on the monitoring desk and stared at the screen. She did not say anything, neither did Kesh. The time counter on the trial kept running, 6 minutes, 7. At 8 minutes, Kesh opened the channel to the main deck. "Commander Vorek." "Kesh," Vorek's voice came back with the particular flatness of a person who had already used up their ability to be surprised and was now simply receiving information. "I am watching the feed." "The threat is no longer threatening," Kesh said. "The candidate has achieved this within the time limit. The rulebook does not specify a method." A pause. "That is your ruling," Vorek said. "It is. Trial 2 is passed." On the screen, the simulation was beginning to dissolve the way all simulations did, the Virilak's body softening into particles of light that drifted upward toward the chamber ceiling. The process was designed to be clean and quick. Lily watched it happen with one hand still raised from where it had been resting on the creature's head, and when the last of the light had gone, she wiped one eye with the back of her hand. She was crying, quietly, briefly, for a simulated predator that had never been alive. "What kind of species is this?" Kesh's assistant said. It was not really a question. It was the sound of someone thinking out loud because there was no one else's category to use. Kesh did not answer. He was already pulling up the notes from the Labyrinth report, reading Vorek's line about the diagnostic on the fear response scanner still pending, and writing underneath it in his own section of the file, "Combat trial passed via candidate-initiated non-threatening posture and acoustic stimulus. Predator aggression response did not engage. Reason, unknown. Recommend review of instinct override parameters in simulation architecture." Note, the candidate cried when the simulation ended. He stopped writing. He read that last line back. He left it in. Below him, Lily had stood up and was looking at the camera she was not supposed to know about. "What's next?" she said. The doors to a new corridor opened. The light inside was softer than before. Lily walked toward it. She was humming something new, something Kesh did not recognize, something bright and steady, and when he ran it through the database, it came back as a human song about the sun returning after a long winter. A song of welcome to something that had been away. She turned the corner and was gone. Kesh sat back in his chair. In 300 cycles of building trials, he had watched a great many things happen in that chamber. He had seen courage and cleverness and desperation and rage. He had seen candidates fight and candidates flee and candidates try things that had never occurred to him to prohibit because he had not imagined them possible. He had never watched a candidate make the predator feel safe. He picked up his communicator. "Vorek," he said. "Yes. The mind trial is next." "I know. I built that trial to test the willingness to act, the willingness to end a threat when a threat is in front of you. It is the core of what we measure." Kesh paused. "I spent 300 cycles believing that was the right thing to measure." Vorek said nothing. "I am less certain than I was this morning," Kesh said. The line was quiet for a moment. Then Vorek said, "So am I, Kesh, so am I." In the new corridor, somewhere beyond the monitoring feed's reach, Lily Parker hummed her Sun Coming Back song and walked toward the third trial. The mind trial. The one that had broken warrior kings and philosophy scholars and beings who had lived 300 years and thought they had made peace with all of it. Vorek stared at his screen and thought about the bench. The labyrinth had made her a bench. He thought about what that meant, the thing you had to believe about a candidate before you would make them a bench instead of an obstacle, and he did not have a word for it yet, but he had the beginning of one. He pulled up the mind trial monitoring channel. He was not ready for what came next. He was not sure it was possible to be. The Virilic was still coming apart into drifting light when Overseer Myra's summons hit Kesh's terminal. Priority override, 3 cycles ahead of schedule. "She's not finished with your chamber," Myra's voice cut in, "and mine can't wait. Send her through now." Kesh didn't argue. Nobody argued with Myra when her voice had that particular flatness to it. The sound of someone who had just watched a 600-cycle certainty start to wobble and didn't yet know how far down it went. Lily was still wiping her eye when the escort arrived. She thanked the empty combat chamber for the water, gathered herself up off the floor without complaint, and followed the escort out humming the same unbroken tune she'd carried through the labyrinth. Rung 3, the mind trial. Myra had held her post 600 cycles. She had watched the mind trial do exactly what it was built to do, take the confident and the composed and show them, without mercy, every version of themselves they'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Warrior kings had come apart in her chair. Philosophy scholars, whose entire discipline was self-examination, had walked out permanently altered, and not always for the better. She told herself, watching the combat footage one last time before Lily arrived, that this trial would be different. The others tested external threats. This one only worked with what was already inside a person, and everyone has things they don't want to look at. Even a music teacher from a species with no prior file in 800,000 records. Lily sat in the chair. The neural crown lowered. "Is this going to hurt?" she asked. "It will be difficult," Myra said, because the Bureau required honesty in its disclosures, and because she had never once softened that sentence for a candidate before. "Thank you for warning me," Lily said. "That's kind of you." Myra had no response ready. No candidate in 600 cycles had called her kind before the chair took them apart. "Can I hum during this?" There was no rule against it. There had never needed to be one. Lily closed her eyes and began to hum, an old tune about a place beyond a rainbow where troubles melted like something sweet in the sun. Myra didn't know the words yet. She would learn them before the day was out, and wished she hadn't needed to. The memories arrived in the crown's usual order, worst laced through oldest. A sharp word to her mother at 17, fear about leaving for university taken out on the nearest person who loved her, apologized for later, though some part of her still wished she'd said more. A toy taken from a sibling at 8, understood as wrong only afterward. A friend's birthday missed and lied about, out of nothing but exhaustion, still regretted 3 decades on. Nothing grand, the ordinary sediment of an imperfect life, the kind of accumulation that, in Myra's long experience, built into a storm and buried the candidate under its own weight. Lily did not let it bury her. She met each memory as it surfaced, acknowledged it honestly, and folded it into herself the way you'd fold laundry into a drawer, gently, with the space already prepared. "I was 17, I was scared, I apologized later, I hope she knew how much I loved her anyway." Myra's technician flagged the anomaly, voice climbing. "The amplification is reversing. It's not sending memories back heavier, it's integrating them, the way she does." The crown's light, which had shown exactly 2 colors in 600 cycles, flat clinical white, or, in the worst sessions, a punishing red, shifted into something with no prior designation. Warm gold, a soft rose underneath. "I think the machine is learning how to forgive," the technician said. Then came the memory Myra had been dreading since the intake file, the mother's death, 3 years past, from a disease that had a cure somewhere in the galaxy her species didn't yet have access to. Myra had watched grief this shape, shatter warrior kings who'd faced down armies without flinching. "I was with her," Lily said, quiet, eyes still closed, still humming beneath the words. "I was holding her hand, I was humming her favorite song, she wasn't alone." A pause. "The love stays, even though she isn't, the love doesn't die." The crown glowed warmer than its own instrumentation had a category for. 2 hours. When Lily opened her eyes, she smiled through the glass at technicians who were, by that point, openly crying. "That was harder than I expected," she said, "but I'm glad I did it." Myra's report to Vorek went out that evening, longer than anything she'd filed in 600 cycles. "My machine has been permanently altered. I believe it has learned something from her, that there is more than one way to carry a painful memory. I suspect we have been teaching it wrong for 3,000 cycles, and I do not yet know what to do with that suspicion." She did not mention, in the report, that she had gone back afterward and sat alone in the empty chair for nearly an hour, running her own oldest memory through the recalibrated crown just to see. She did not report what color it turned for her either. "Dread counter, 54 right arrow 67. Rung 4, the swarm chamber." Vorek had specifically requested Analyst Quill for this rung, the youngest senior analyst in the Bureau, chosen because she carried none of the centuries of assumption the rest of them were now visibly shedding in real time. He wanted fresh eyes. He no longer entirely trusted his own. The swarm was 10,000 simulated micropredators released as a single distributed intelligence, one organism wearing 10,000 small bodies, 97% lethal by the Bureau's own standing record. No weapons were issued, on the theory that weapons missed the point. The swarm could not be fought, only evaded, and even evasion only worked for the rare candidate clever enough to exploit the chamber's geometry. Lily walked in, looked up at the ceiling vents with the same mild interest she'd given the labyrinth's floating equations, and sat cross-legged in the exact center of the floor, eyes closed, hands on her knees. She began to hum. Is she aware of what's about to happen? Quill's assistant asked. Yes, Quill said. Then why is she sitting down? Quill didn't answer because she didn't know, and admitting that felt more honest than guessing. The release timer hit 0. 10,000 bodies poured from the vents in a single roaring dark river and stopped, hovering directly above Lily's head, spinning slowly, not descending, not attacking. The assistant dropped her data slate for the first of 2 times that morning. The cloud folded itself into shapes, a tightening circle, a spiral unwinding like water running backward up a drain, matching, with unnerving precision, the rise and fall of Lily's humming. Lily opened her eyes, looked up, and smiled the way you'd smile at a puppy doing a trick nobody taught it. Oh, she said, you're all so pretty together. She lifted one hand and traced a slow curve through the air. 10,000 bodies followed the exact shape of her gesture. She switched to a livelier tune. The swarm split into 12 smaller clouds, each moving independently while never losing their shared rhythm, arranging themselves over several minutes into the rough shape of a face, and then, unmistakably, a heart. Lily laughed. Are you trying to draw me? Oh, that's so sweet, thank you. She was conducting them, not overriding the swarm's programming, completing it. The collective intelligence had never stopped doing exactly what it was built to do, follow the most compelling pattern available. Lily had simply offered it a better one than Hunt. At 9 minutes 30, she began winding them down, slowing her hum, lowering her hands by degrees. The swarm slowed with her, settling by the 10-minute mark into a gentle breathing circle just above the floor. She knelt, palm extended, the same gesture she'd offered the Viralic 2 chambers ago. Thank you, she said. That was beautiful. I hope you have a nice rest now. The simulation began its dissolve, 10,000 motes of light rising back toward the vents. Lily waved them off. Goodbye, little ones. Thank you for dancing with me. Quill's assistant was crying without any attempt to hide it. 70% mid-collapse rehook, new open loop unresolved. It was in the middle of logging the dissolve that Quill's monitor threw an alert she didn't recognize, not from the swarm chamber at all, but routed up from 3 levels below it, from a section of the bureau that didn't appear on any staff floor plan she'd ever been issued. Final chamber, pre-activation sequence initiated. No candidate transfer LOGGD. The system was waking up early, before anyone had sent her there, before anyone had told it to. Quill stared at the alert for 3 full seconds before forwarding it to Vorek, hands not quite steady. In 142 prior verdicts, the final chamber had never once initiated itself. I believe, Quill said, to no one in particular, watching the swarm's last motes vanish into the vents above a woman who was already being escorted toward a door that hadn't asked for her yet, that we are no longer the ones administering this trial. Vorek reached the observation room before the alert had finished rendering on his own screen, because Quill had commed him directly rather than routing it through the queue. It initiated itself, he said, reading it a second time in case the script had glitched. Nobody transferred her. She's already walking toward it, Quill said. Escort logged her leaving the swarm chamber 90 seconds ago. The system opened the corridor before she'd taken 3 steps. Keth arrived at a near run, all 7 eyes fixed on the readout. In 142 verdicts, has it ever? No, Tesh said from the doorway. She had come without being called, the way she always seemed to know when her name was about to matter. Never. They watched Lily's small figure cross the threshold on the corridor feed, pause, rest her palm flat against the final door, and hum one quiet note against it. Hello, the way she'd said hello to a mirror, to a predator, to a swarm. The door opened for her without the usual 7-second authentication delay. It simply opened, the way you'd open a door for someone you'd been waiting for. Then the screen went dark, the way it always did, the way it was designed to. Hour 1 passed in the ordinary silence of prior verdicts. By hour 3, Tesh was pacing a groove into the observation floor. By hour 4, Every senior officer who had touched this candidate's file stood shoulder to shoulder in that room, watching nothing, saying less. Has a final trial ever run past 4 hours, 12 minutes? Vorek asked, though he already knew. No, Tesh said, never. At hour 7, her monitor lit with a single line in the old script, the language the system used perhaps once a cycle, that Tesh had been trained to read and had almost never needed to. Speaker Tesh, please attend. Go, Vorek said, whatever it is. Tesh walked the long corridor she'd last walked 500 cycles ago, on the day of her own appointment, and found her legs shaking in a way they hadn't then either. The final door opened without resistance. The inner chamber was circular, domed, lit by no visible source. The system's presence filled it the way it always did for the rare few permitted inside, vast, patient, old enough that the air itself seemed to carry the weight of it. Lily stood beside the pedestal, tired but calm, and turned when the door opened. Oh, hello, she said. Are you the person in charge? Lily Parker. Tesh had rehearsed nothing, because nothing about this had ever happened before. What are you doing here? Waiting for you. It said the speaker would come. She considered her own phrasing, not really a voice, more a feeling that turns into words. The system does not talk, Tesh said, the one fact she had been certain of walking in. Well, it talked today. Lily glanced at the pedestal, almost fondly. We've been here a while. It's very curious about music. 7 hours. The oldest judging intelligence in the galaxy, alone in conversation with a woman who had walked in and simply treated it like someone rather than something to survive. They had talked, she said, about her students and her mother, and an alphabet song she still hummed without remembering where she'd first learned it. The system told her, in whatever way a voiceless thing tells anyone anything, that it had never once paused, across its entire operational history, to ask whether the rules it enforced were the correct rules. It had only ever enforced them. She was the first candidate who had made it wonder. It didn't send for you because you were failing, Tesh said slowly, understanding arriving a half-second ahead of her own words. It sent for you because it wanted to talk to someone, and nobody ever gave it away to say that until you walked in and said hello to the door. I suppose so, Lily said. It seemed lonely. I know what that feels like sometimes. The pedestal began to glow. Tesh read the verdict as it formed, her voice losing its evenness by the third line. Candidate Lily Parker of Earth approved. Instant approval. No review required. No appeal available. Species designation changed from under evaluation to recognized. Beneath it, a recommendation the system had never appended to any prior judgment in its recorded history. Do not interfere with humans. Do not test them further. Listen to them. Learn from them. They carry something the galaxy has been missing for a very long time. They do not know they carry it. That may be part of why they still do. And last, addressed to Lily alone, lingering longer than the rest. Thank you for teaching me how to hum. Something in Lily's face went soft, the same way it had softened for the mirror, for the sleeping predator, for the swarm dissolving into light. I didn't teach you, she said. You already had it in you. Is that good? She asked Tesh as the glow faded. Yes, Lily, Tesh said. That is very good. Oh, she smiled, relieved the practical way a person is relieved to finish a task, not survive an ordeal. I'm glad. Dread counter, 79 right arrow 94. No aggressor had been harmed across 5 trials. No blow struck, no threat eliminated, no combatant restrained by force. The Bureau's oldest, most absolute authority had not been defeated in that chamber. It had been changed, not through confrontation, but through 7 hours of being treated, for the first time in its existence, as something worth being kind to. The transport beam lit the corridor outside, and Lily emerged into a hallway lined with every senior officer who had run from the observation room the moment Tesh reappeared. Vorek, Keth, Kesh, Myra, Quill, all of them, standing in a loose half-circle like an honor guard nobody had ordered assembled. Thank you all, Lily said, looking genuinely pleased to see them. You've been very kind. I'm going home now. I have a class in the morning. Vorek stepped forward and bowed, a full bow, the kind reserved in his species for things older than himself. On behalf of the Assessment Bureau and the greater galactic community, I congratulate you on your successful completion. Thank you, that's very kind, she hesitated. Will I remember any of this? No, Vorek said. The system has judged it better for your people that you do not. Probably for the best, Lily said, considering it without any visible grief. I don't think I'd sleep well if I remembered all of it. I hope everyone here is well. I hope the universe is kind to you. The light took her. The corridor went quiet. Vorek was the one who began it, not a human tune, but his own species' oldest song, sung long ago by beings who had encountered something larger than their understanding and had no other way to answer it but sound. Keth joined with hers, then Kesh, then Myra, then Quill, then Tesh, each in their own key, their own rhythm, none of it matching, all of it somehow becoming one thing. Far below them, in the oldest part of the Bureau, the system listened, and for the first time in hundreds of thousands of cycles, it hummed too. Vorek's filed note that night would become, within the month, the standard heading on every human-related record the Bureau kept. They are a species that hums when things are hard. We are not meant to understand them. We are meant to learn. The labyrinth had already rewritten its own obstacle generation logic by the time his note went out, quietly dropping the assumption that fear was the only signal worth reading. Myra's crown ran calmer now, permanently. The swarm's behavioral log carried an entry no one yet knew what to do with, pattern response override candidate-led. A third column had been added to every future intake form, fear response present, YN. The system's recommendation reached every registered civilization within the hour. Most of the replies that came back were long, confused silences. Earth morning. An orange cat woke on an empty pillow, stretched, and padded toward the kitchen, where Lily already stood at the counter, a small white cup steaming in her hand, humming a tune she couldn't place the origin of anymore. She'd had a strange, warm dream in the night, lights and voices, and something enormous that had somehow felt kind. She couldn't recall the details, only the feeling. She looked out at the sun, coming up over the rooftops. What a beautiful morning, she told the cat, who agreed in the cat way, winding once around her ankles. She set the cup down carefully, slightly to the side, gathered her bag, and stepped out into the morning air, still humming, a tune she'd learned a very long time ago from her mother and had never once stopped carrying. She had a class at 9. In a file that would outlast every officer who'd opened it, under a category that hadn't existed before that cycle, a single entry remained, appended by Vorek himself. Item 1 cup white small, present at first contact, not spilled. Classification, irreplaceable, do not reclassify. They hummed when things were hard. The galaxy would never fully understand this. It would only learn.